a particular risk offers, your electric bill isn't going to offer you creative deferment. The only thing your new bosses will tell you over and over again is, be careful, be careful. You'll start to worry about your future. What if the people who pay for my dream don't like this idea? What if they're offended and cease being fans? Is this idea worth risking our savings account for? Is this idea worth sending our kids back to school in pants that don't fit? I was able to avoid a lot of these conversations by staying at my last day job years after I wanted to quit. I was able to skate past lots of temptations because I held on to that job. I was able to write for CNN because I had a day job. They contacted me about writing for their website. If I didn't have a day job, I might have considered the danger of talking to CNN and played it safe. As a Christian, I was well aware CNN was considered the devil's news. What if my Christian fans were super conservative and hated my association with CNN? What if churches that booked me to speak found out and canceled my engagements? I tend to be pretty conservative and saw it simply as a great platform to share my ideas. But what if other people didn't see it that way? The threat to my dream's momentum loomed large, until I remembered I still had a day job. Even if I lost every speaking gig I had booked for the next year, my wife and kids would be taken care of. My mortgage and food were not tied to my ability to sustain the status quo with a dream that was at its heart trying to break the status quo. Instead of compromising, I got to stay true to my dream. I got to write an honest, upfront article about why Christians like me can be jerks online. Hundreds of people didn't like it. Lots of people commented on it and said some pretty hateful things. But through it all, I got to stay dangerous. I got to stay focused on doing what I had set out to do. I know it sounds crazy, but people with jobs tend to have more creative freedom than people without. Want to stay dangerous with your dream? Want to make some real progress? Don't quit your day job. Not yet. Off the cuff, this is probably one of the hardest myths we wrestle with when it comes to dreams and dream jobs, because we see the person that quits as having pulled this parachute and jumped out of a plane, and we imagine them as an artist with a beret and a scarf, and they drink latte and they just paint all the time, or they do wildly creative things. And we feel like on the other side of that, someone with a day job is chained down to their cubicle and they don't live this huge, colorful life. But I really do believe that idea that if you have a day job, if you have a sponsor or a patron to your dream, you get to really take some fun, creative risks, because the two worlds aren't tied together so closely that if you take the wrong risk, you punish your entire world. And so I really believe in that idea, although that's one of the ideas that I could see some pushback to. The real reason you should stay put. My weight fluctuates from time to time by about 20 pounds. That last sentence made it sound like I don't have anything to do with it. Like maybe the moon is the problem. It's not. It's me. Well, me and Gordo's. Gordo's is a microwavable queso dip that Walmart sells. I don't like sweets. I don't eat ice cream. But chips and queso kill me. That's easily my kryptonite. Still, I was okay for years when you couldn't make it gourmet at home. After several failed attempts at boiling and heating my own cheese concoctions, I gave up and relegated myself to periodic bliss at Mexican restaurants. Then along came Gordo's. My life changed. My beltline followed suit. I eventually looked down and shortly thereafter put myself on a slow-carb diet that included no more Gordo's, which in Spanish means fat, by the way. I expected to lose weight and feel better physically, but something else happened that caught me off guard. As I dieted, I started to get more done at work. I started to write more on this book. I started to get up earlier and be more deliberate about spending time with my wife and kids. It wasn't instant, but over a period of weeks, the momentum of more healthy eating spread to every part of my life. Why? Because discipline begets discipline. When you step up to a challenge before you, your ramped up resources rub off on other areas of your life. You wouldn't think eating less fat would impact how closely you monitor your family's financial budget, but it's all tied together. Discipline and focus are contagious, and they tend to spread their benefits all around. Unfortunately, this works both ways. When you don't eat well or sleep enough, or you get upside down on a car loan, it drags down the other parts of your life. This is particularly true when it comes to quitting your day job before you should, especially for men. Men need to work. I don't just mean that in a rustle cattle and punch mountain lions in the face kind of way. I'm a writer. I do not have calluses on my hands. And workmen who make repairs on my home address my wife, who has a degree in construction management. Wrenches puzzle me. I mean, men need work in a purpose kind of way. Men need a project and some progress at all times. I think women need these things too, but having spent the last 35 years of my life on the boy side of the ball, this is the role I understand. I know men in their 50s who have not held full-time jobs for decades by their own decision. They're not injured or incapable of employment. They just don't like to be tied down, and so they flitter about, freelancing now and then to make ends meet. Their marriages are falling apart. Coincidentally, I've never met a wife who said, "Our marriage awakened the moment my husband quit working and stopped providing stability for the family." A friend my age had the same situation. After a couple of years of working 5-hour-a-week part-time jobs, his life and marriage started to unravel. His wife was constantly burdened. She wanted to have kids but didn't see how that was possible, with him contributing so little to the family's well-being. That makes sense to me. If I were a girl, a dangerous way to start a sentence. Why would I expect you to be a committed, attentive, dedicated father if you couldn't dedicate yourself to something as simple as a day job? If humanity's chief needs include security and stability, and you're not actively contributing to either, why would I trust you with another life, let alone my own? This wasn't an idea I invented. Thousands of people have written about the need and purpose of work in our lives. Actor Ryan Gosling dealt with this after the success of the movie The Notebook. To combat the sense of drifting aimlessly, he got a job making sandwiches at a deli. When asked about it in an interview, he said, "The problem with Hollywood is that nobody works. They have meals. They go to Pilates. But it's not enough. So they do drugs. If everybody had a pile of rocks in their backyard and spent every day moving them from one side of the yard to the other, it would be a much happier place." We need to work. And though I feel like I'm stepping on Oprah's toes here, if a guy or girl you're dating is lazy and jobless, chances are marriage is not going to jumpstart things. Having a baby doesn't jumpstart a marriage. Getting married doesn't jumpstart a relationship. Quitting a job doesn't jumpstart a dream, because dreams take planning, purpose, and progress to succeed. That stuff has to happen before you quit your day job. Often it should occur months and even years before. You've probably heard the axiom, success always comes when preparation meets opportunity. It's true. And the opportunity to quit your job will always be there. The real question is whether you've prepared. Figuring it all out as you go is not a plan. Escaping imperfect circumstances is not a purpose. Quitting your job because it feels right is not progress. It's precisely the opposite. Want to demonstrate love for your spouse or significant other? Keep your day job while you chase your dream job. Want to learn how to be dedicated and focused on your dream? Practice being dedicated and focused at work. Want to give your dream the best shot of success? Learn how to be successful at work. We often demonize our day jobs when we dream. We make them enemies of what we really want to do. But if you dream the right way and learn to quit the right way, your day job can actually be your dream job's greatest ally. One last word about quitting your job, because maybe you should. Initially, I was tempted to slam this chapter somewhere in the middle of the book. My fear was that the casual reader, the girl at Urban Outfitters with a really complicated scarf, might be turned off by having the first chapter in a book about chasing your dreams begin with the assertion, "Don't quit your job." I understand that. I do. It's common for dream-following books to start with encouraging chapters like, "Your dream is only one step away," or "Dare to believe and it will all come true." And that's fine. There's a place for that, I guess. I just didn't think that place was the beginning of this book. Despite my extensive history of job quitting and the advice of scores of people, I didn't quit my day job at autotrader.com for 3 years. That probably doesn't seem like a long time to you, but to me, it is the equivalent of a 21-year career. During this tenure, I started a blog that is read in 97% of the countries in the world. I wrote a book. I sold that book to more people than 95% of all authors do. I built 2 kindergartens in Vietnam. I was offered an additional 2-book deal from one of the biggest publishers in the world, and I keynoted at conferences across the country. Most of it would have been impossible without a day job that allowed me to duck the dawns, keep my nose, stay dangerous, and stabilize my marriage. But eventually, I did quit my day job for something else, something crazy. And I think you might too. But before you do, we need to kill some popular but precarious lies about quitting. Chapter 2. Removing the I'm from your butt. We love goodbyes. I've never attended a steadfast obedience party at work. I've never been invited to a staying put get-together. I've never heard of a sticking around forever shindig. And I haven't for one simple reason. We live in a corporate culture that celebrates people who leave and ignores those who stay. I don't blame them. There is something inherently sexy about quitting your job. You conjure up adventures and goatees and close calls in foreign lands with girls whose names have an attractive number of vowels. You can't help but think about the potential life someone will find out there in the wide world. We get really drunk on the idea of what might be. We ignore what already is. We don't notice the person who comes in every day, tirelessly handling key components of a business week after week. We get starry-eyed about the adventure someone will inevitably have when he quits the same company. Think of the opportunities. Think of the dream. These are the things we exclaim at going-away parties held in our offices while eating mediocre grocery store cake. I remember the last time I attended a going-away party for a girl I knew. After nearly 10 years of loyal service, she was quitting. In our city, she was one of the highest paid in her field. She still had a lot of runway ahead of her. She was quitting anyway. It was her last day, and we were all there to talk about her. I wish I had $1 for every time someone told her, "I'm so proud of you for following your dream and stepping out in courage." Over and over, we lauded this girl with envy at her boldness, as if only cowards would stay at their jobs. We are so ashamed that we didn't have the guts to follow in her footsteps. Take these broken wings and learn to fly again. Learn to live so free. No one made a peep about doubting her decision. No one said the I word, impulsive. She was the emperor in brightly colored quitting clothes, and who were we to tell her otherwise? Worse still, she didn't even have another job or another plan to make money. She simply quit to follow a fuzzy feeling she had in her heart. We didn't care. She was our hero. Labeling quitters automatic winners, coupled with the ready demonization of our jobs we talked about in Chapter 1, has had an interesting effect on us. It has turned us into the I'm but generation. We don't know what we want, but this isn't it. When I speak to people online or in person, we inevitably end up talking about what they do. Hundreds, if not thousands of times, I find one thread of consistency in the explanations I hear. People say, "I'm a teacher, but I want to be an artist. I'm an accountant, but I want to be a therapist. I'm a project manager, but I want to start my own company." At first, I was surprised by this because I think the perception is that if you're unhappy at work, you must not know what you want to do. If you're not in love with your current job, you must not know how to finish the "I'm a blank, but want to be a blank" assertion. But that isn't what I found to be true. If anything, most of us have at least a blurry definition of what we'd like to do if we could. No one ever told me, "I'm a pharmacist, but I have no idea what I want to be." Absolutely zero idea, really. Never had a dream, never had a desire, never had something that made me feel alive. I am a blank canvas of misery in the pharmacy where I work. No. There was always at least a hint of some other desire, a dream or expectation for life. I don't think we're confused about what we want to be when we grow up. We might not be able to say, "I want to become a CPA and open my own business on 10th Street in Cleveland, Ohio in March of 2014. But for the most part, we've had a glimpse of our dream job. And even if we don't know precisely what our thing is or our passion, there are plenty of ways to find out. For instance, according to the Myers-Briggs Personality Assessment, I am an ENFP. That means I am into extroversion, intuition, feeling, and perception. According to that personality test, those 4 letters indicate a lot about me. I'm friendly. I'm a global thinker. I like people, etc. My favorite part of the analysis, though, is the list of people who are also ENFPers. One site lists Sinbad and Bill Cosby as fellow ENFPers. Their one distinguishing credit for Cosby is that he was in Ghost Dad. Why didn't they mention that slightly popular series called The Cosby Show? Would you ever in your life describe Bill Cosby as that guy who was in that movie Ghost Dad? The best part of this web analysis is it also lists fictional ENFPers. Want to know who I am like? Balky from Perfect Strangers, Ariel from The Little Mermaid, and Urkel from Family Matters. Awesome. That is quite a motley crew. According to the DISC Profiles rankings of 0 to 100, I scored 100 points on I and 0 points on C. I stands for influence, and C stands for conscientiousness. So I'll be able to convince you to do something, but you'll probably think I'm a jerk during the experience. I am also wildly different in my natural life, who I really am, and my adapted life, who I am in public. There is actually a 60-point gap between those 2 ratings, and considering it's a 100-point scale, that is troubling. According to another test, I am an ideation guy. A different one rated me as a otter. A Christian test said that I am a Jacob. There is no shortage of personality tests and job tests out on the market, and I have taken a lot of them. Some are great and deeply inform you about some questions you might have about your life. Some feel a little fluffy, like a fortune teller who asks broad questions and gives you even broader answers. That is why I am a little hesitant to put a chapter in here about figuring out what your dream is. It would be easier if we all just knew. It would be easier if we came onto the planet with that written out clearly. That is not the case. If it were, I would have not been a horrible guitar player for about 30 minutes. That's how long I was willing to dedicate to the craft. I owned a Martin D1, which is an expensive, beautiful guitar, upon which I was able to play the opening to Every Rose Has Its Thorn by the band Poison. Perhaps you are familiar with this exquisite ballad. I was also a horrible painter for about 30 minutes. I thought that maybe what I wanted to do was paint. So I took an accomplished local painter to an art store. She encouraged me to spend $200 on really fancy paints. Then I went home, sat in the yard, and painted a still life of a Diet Coke can. Then I quit. I was a horrible runner for about 2 hours and 39 minutes. That's how long it took me to run a half marathon. I thought maybe I could be a runner, shave my legs, get all skinny, and own yellow sneakers. Only really fast or crazy people are allowed to own yellow running sneakers. I was going to do it this time. For real. I was going to be a runner. But after my first race, I spent an hour in the bathtub, finally being forced out by my wife, who was leaving to run errands and was concerned I would drown. I'm not a guitar player. I'm not a painter. I'm not a runner. I'm a writer. Something it took me decades to remember. Decades I don't want you to waste. Decades I want you to enjoy doing what it is you want to do with your life. I'd much rather us figure it out, capture it, and get you started today than have you spin your wheels like me for so many years. So what do you want to do? I have exactly one idea about that question, but I think it is surprisingly enough. The 42-year-old beekeeper. Whenever you start trying to actively figure out what it is you want to do, whenever you start to search for the thing that makes you come alive, something weird happens. You imagine you are going to discover it. You might not verbalize this, but inside, you start to think that when you finally land upon what it is you're supposed to be doing with your life, it will be a pleasant surprise. We all tend to view the process of finding our dream job like arriving at our own surprise birthday party. We imagine we'll take a personality test, arrive at the results, and be blown away, like we never saw it coming. Circus acrobat? Wow! And I'm an accountant. No wonder these years have been so hard. I should be in the circus. We think finding out what we want to do is going to be a revelation. In our 20s or 30s or 40s, we will stumble upon some activity we've never done, and like a kid tasting ice cream for the first time, we'll be hooked. Light bulb. Turns out we like beekeeping. Although we've always appreciated honey as a concept, and definitely in Cheerios, we've never had a fascination with queen bees and hives. But suddenly, we want to spend time around bees. A lot of time in a lot of weird suits with smoke and local farmers who have braids in their beards. That's what we believe about our dreams. But dreams rarely work that way. In his book, Start With Why, author Simon Sinek discusses this reality. He calls our dreams, or calling, our why. He says, the why for every individual or organization comes from the past. It is born out of the upbringing and life experience of an individual. He further explains that finding why is not a process of invention. I agree with that, and I would take it one step further. I think finding your dream job, or what Sinek calls your why, is more than a revelation or an act of discovery. I believe it's a process of recovery. More often than not, finding out what you love doing most is about recovering an old love or an inescapable truth that has been silenced for years, even decades. When you come to your dream job, your thing, it is rarely a first encounter. It's usually a reunion. So instead of setting out to discover the thing you love doing, you've got to change your thinking and set out to recover it, maybe even rescue it. Why? Because somehow you lost it along the way. I think this happens for a few reasons. For one thing, you might not have been ready for it the first time around. I once heard Bono tell Bill Hybels in an interview that in the 80s, he and his wife visited Ethiopia and saw the tremendous need there firsthand. On the way home, he told his wife Allie, "We will never forget this." She responded, "You know we will, because to carry this with you every day is too much." Bono reflected on that moment and said that, despite that, we were both clear that at some point we would be called upon to revisit these questions that in truth were probably too big for our young minds. The young, rising star was not ready to start his work with ONE, the charity organization, in 1985. He was not yet a philanthropist interacting with people like Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela. He was an up-and-coming musician who needed to grow before he could actually step into his calling. Still, it was there. And in the 90s, he and his calling were reunited for good. Your dream might not be as extreme as Bono's, but like him, you may meet yours before you're ready to run after it. That's what happened to me with blogging. In 2001, before it was a verb, my friend Billy and I started a website that specialized in music interviews, book reviews, and pop culture. I ran it for a year and could have gotten in on the ground floor of that medium. But I wasn't ready to handle the commitment. It would be 7 years later and multiple blogs before I could start Stuff Christians Like. By that time, I was better prepared. When 4,000 people showed up on day 8 of its existence, I was able to handle an influx that would have wrecked me in 2001. Another thing that estranges us from our dreams is everyday distraction. Rarely is the distraction so large you notice it. I've never met someone who says, "I was unable to write my great American novel because my house burned down." Instead, I've met hundreds of people who tell me they've never written their books because they are too busy. When you're in college, it's easy to daydream what you'll be when you grow up. You have huge chunks of time for the pursuit of whatever, but the chunks turn to crumbs when you hit the real world. There are bills and babies and jobs. You've got a calendar that barks out marching orders and multiple email accounts to manicure each day. When life gets full, it's a shame that your dream is one of the first things to get lost in the fray. We stop painting in our spare time or designing on the weekends because it seems such a fruitless endeavor. What a silly way to spend our free time when we could be getting that much-deserved rest or that much-needed mall therapy. You and your dream lose touch, and then years or decades later, like that summer camp love September stole away, we bump into our dreams and that bittersweet beckoning. Oh, I remember you. Even then, some of us don't want to acknowledge the former feelings. We play dumb. This comes out in my own life when I try to write. The hardest part of writing for me is being honest. It's not that I want to lie. I don't set out that way, but if I'm not careful, I end up playing the role of a clever writer instead of writing something that is true of my own experience and helpful to others. My wife pointed this out when I wrote my first book. She read an early chapter, paused, and then confessed, "I think it's well written. It's just that the whole thing is a lie." That's not fun feedback to get at the kitchen table, But she was right. I wasn't writing the book I wanted to write. I was writing the book I thought I should write. I was sitting down and trying to copy the writing of other authors. I was writing Donald Miller's book or Tim Ferriss's book. Why? Because I had discounted my dream. I was afraid to give credence to those often frightening feelings that come with wanting something fervently. In a contrarian version of the grass is always greener, we tend to discount the value, importance, and urgency of our own dreams. In a subtle form of self-preservation, we find ourselves rejecting compliments people give us for doing what we love. When someone notices we're good at something, we respond, "Oh, that's nothing. It's just something I like to do in my spare time." The soundtrack we play in our minds is that our gift is nothing. Our dream really isn't that meaningful. It is just a bit of gossamer we play with sometimes. Don't think twice about it. The longer you play this soundtrack, the easier it is to believe it, especially if someone who matters to you tells you that your dream doesn't matter. Teachers, bosses, sometimes even parents will tell you that you're not good enough to pursue a particular dream. The more we develop this muscle of doubt, the stronger it becomes. But the doubt is still a deception. When I gave this book to a friend to read, she told me a story from her own life, and she said that when she was young, she loved to dance. That was her favorite thing to do. And in the 8th grade, her mom pulled her aside and said, "Hey, you know you're not going to be a Rockette, right? Like, that's not where this is going. You understand that, right?" And she was crushed, and she stopped dancing shortly after that. And I think sometimes when we take feedback from people like that, we act as if they can predict the future, as if they know everything that's going to happen in our lives. And so that's to me, one of the biggest wounds that we suffer when we try to dream is the words and the input from other people. And sometimes, even if it's well-meaning, it can shatter that tiny, small thing that's just starting to grow. If you recognize the deception, if you admit that there is a chance that you are good, perhaps even great at something, you should feel a little uncomfortable. Because if your gift is not nothing, that means it is something. And a gift that is something is always a little terrifying, for at least 3 reasons. Number 1, nothing can't hurt you. If your gift is something, then the pull to explore it is always there. You are compelled, even if only by curiosity, to at least try. Maybe you won't jump off a cliff for this something, but your chances of getting hurt are dramatically greater from pursuing something than nudging up to nothing. Number 2, nothing is comfortable. Call it the better the devil you know than the devil you don't know syndrome. We're familiar with the nothing lie. It feels like an old sweater at this point, and we like that. The unknowns of a dream are just too disconcerting. What evils might arise? We'd rather not find out. Number 3, nothing is normal. People with somethings are weird. In his book, Orbiting the Giant Hairball, A Corporate Fool's Guide to Surviving with Grace, Gordon MacKenzie says that if you ask a room full of first graders, how many artists are there in the room? They all eagerly raise their hands. If you ask a room full of third graders, only a third of the class raises their hands. MacKenzie laments, the higher the grade, the fewer children raise their hands. By the time I reached 6th grade, no more than 1 or 2 did so, and then only ever so slightly, guardedly, their eyes glancing from side to side uneasily, betraying a fear of being identified by the group as a closet artist. And it's not just art that we feel that way about. It's dreams, too. We